Hi, and welcome to episode 43 of the Give Me a Crown Knitting, Spinning and Bits and Pieces podcast. My name's Nina, also known as Give Me a Crown on Ravelry, Instagram, Pinterest, and it's also the name of my Etsy shop where I sell DPN holders, project bags, zipper pouches and various bits and pieces. Today is Monday the 1st of August 2016 and it's lovely to have your company. We have a friendly little Ravelry group, which you can find in the groups tab on Ravelry by searching for Give Me a Crown. And there is a say hello thread in there, so if you want to join and want to introduce yourself, then feel free to put a comment in there. It's by no means necessary, but it's always nice to know who's out there. This week I have some spinning and some knitting, a little bit of crochet, and a little bit of general chatter at the end. So starting off with the finished objects, I have this. So this is my finished skein of yarn in the colourway Heath, and I spun this from fibre from Kathy's Fibres, who's an Australian fibre and yarn dyer and seller, and it's a fine merino 20.7 micron in the colourway Heath, and it was 100 grams. So I showed this off last week as a single, and what I did was I ended up chain plying it to keep the colours in the yarn. My skein isn't perfect because I only have a small niddy noddy and it doesn't fit really 100 grams of yarn, but I did it anyway. As I was plying this up, I was using my new Lazy Kate, and so I had one single bobbin with the singles on the Lazy Kate, and I was trying to figure out the best placement for it. I didn't quite figure that out. It's not a tension Lazy Kate, and I was finding that it was sort of sometimes it was jumping around a little bit and causing some sort of corkscrews in my singles because too much of the single was coming out. So I just need to keep on experimenting with different placements. I tried to put a second bobbin onto the Lazy Kate and put a cotton cord around, but it seemed to sort of work a little bit, but more experimentation needed. So this is sort of Unwound, and I think it came out alright. And the rooster's crowing again. For those who watch regularly, they'll know that the neighbour's rooster likes to crow whenever I podcast. So it's a balanced yarn, and before I started the chain plying, I decided to have a bit of a look at YouTube to see how other people suggested Navajo plying or chain plying, because I know that I've kind of developed my own little way of doing it. And I looked at an interweave craft video by Sarah Anderson called Navajo Plying, which I'll link to in the show notes, which can always be found at givemeacrown.com/podcast. And I tried to follow her technique, but it was just causing me a little bit of grief, so I ended up switching back, changing my hands over. But it was still an interesting video because it showed how much twist goes into the plied yarn, so that when you sort of fold it back on itself while it's sort of on the bobbin, you sort of see how much twist there is in there. And she also suggested using a pinky to sort of guide the yarn, and I sort of ended up incorporating that into my technique, but that was that. I had spun the singles now that I have a jumbo fly which has multiple ratios. I spun the singles at 9.5 to 1 ratio, and then I did the plying on a 7.5 to 1 ratio, so it was a slightly slower uptake or twist or something. I'm talking like I know what I'm talking about, but it's all a learning process at the moment. And so I think because I first of all tried to ply it on the same ratio, and it was getting a bit too twisty, so I slowed it down for the plying. On my flyer, I'm not sure if I mentioned when I got it that I thought that it had 3 different ratios, but it actually has 4, because I decided to test the ratios to see if they were accurate based on my wheel, because my wheel is an older traditional Ashford wheel, and I didn't know how sort of accurate it might be, and it actually is accurate, so that was good to know. But while I was reading the instructions, I realised that there's actually 4 ratios on there, so there's an even slower one that I hadn't realised, so that was good. What else? Once I had given this a wash, I did a bit of a snap on it, so that just means sort of doing a bit of that action. So you put your hands inside and then just snap it a little bit, and that sort of expels some of the water and also distributes some of the twist a little bit more after the wash. So I tend to do that with most of the spinning that I do now, because I tend to use a worsted spin rather than a woolen spin. If I was doing a woolen spin, I would do the thwacking thing, which is like which is a lot of fun, but it does bloom the yarn a bit, so I didn't want to do that with this because of the way that I had plied it. So I'm looking forward to figuring out what to knit with this. I haven't got a fixed project in mind. I kind of thought that I might use it for a hat, but I'm not too sure now. I'm thinking maybe some mittens, because it is nice and soft, and I just made a very, very bad skein. Oh, I'll redo that later. So yeah, maybe some mittens with that. My next finished object is a little crochet doily. So this is now finished. This was based on a chart that I found in an old Crochet Monthly magazine. So it's turned out fairly big. I haven't actually measured it, but the original was meant to be 27 centimeters across, and this is more like 45, 50 perhaps. So this is just something that I've been working away on over the last sort of, I don't know, 3-4 weeks, and I'm going to send it off to my grandmother in Finland to put on her coffee table, and I hope she likes it. That's just something that I enjoy tinkering around with now and then, just as something a little bit different. I think I actually learnt to crochet before I learnt to knit. I'm not entirely sure on that, so I think that might be why it sort of feels kind of comfortable to do now and then. And as I was drying it on a towel, I kind of thought that I need some cushion covers. It was looking really sweet on top of a different coloured background, so I might actually do some more at some point and make some cushion covers out of them. I pinned it out after I gave it a wash, pinned it out, and then I've given it a gentle steam iron on a cotton setting. And some people starch them. I've never really done that, but that should be fine to send off. I have a few works in progress. The first is in my Shop Luli project bag, and this is my newborn vertebrae. So I got a nice little nudge the other day on the Ravelry group suggesting that it's a fairly quick knit, so I should just get on with it, and there were some photos of somebody else's newborn vertebrae, so I decided I should get on with it. So this is going to be sent to my cousin for her next child, so she's having a girl after 3 boys, so it's very exciting. So this is as far as I've got. So I haven't shown this for a few weeks because it has been hibernating, and there was no particular reason. I was just sort of just not particularly interested in knitting it for some reason. I think it might be because I had just knit my breathing space pullover, so doing another garment, even though it's a tiny little garment, seemed a bit much. So I have split for the sleeves, and now I'm just working backwards and forwards along the body, and there's only 60 stitches on the body, so that's kind of like the circumference of a sock, but just knit flat. So it really shouldn't take me too long at all to do this. I think there's 15 centimeters, and I'm not giving anything away because the newborn vertebrae is a free pattern, and there are paid versions for larger sizes. But yeah, so I just keep on knitting. So I think if I do an inch a day for the next little while, then I will soon have a newborn vertebrae in time for the baby to be born. What else? So yeah, just setting little goals. It just feels tiny, absolutely tiny. So, yep. Oh, and the yarn is the Morris & Sons Estate 4-ply. This is the Tuscan colourway, and I didn't have a full ball of that, so I have a feeling that I may need to do some stripes, and then I'm going to do the button band that's not a button band that goes around the cardigan in this, which is the fur colourway, which happens to be the same as my pullover. So this must be a leftover from when I was knitting my jumper. So that's that one. So it is getting a bit of love, and thank you for the nudge. My next work in progress is my vanilla chow socks. So I finished one of my socks. So this is a 64 stitch sock. I usually do them sort of 56, but I decided to do a little bit larger just to get a slightly roomier sock. And I put out a question on Instagram wondering about heel heights, because I usually do the heel height as a quarter of the number of cast on stitches. So I would have, so for 64 stitches I would have, oh, I should have thought about this, is that 16 slip stitch rows. But I've been finding that my heels are getting a bit short recently, and I don't know why, but my little formula hasn't been working, so I ended up doing 18. But I had a few suggestions on how to know how long to do your heel. So somebody suggested always doing 14 or 16 slip stitch rows depending on how heavy the fingering weight yarn is, and another person suggested folding the heel flap into sort of triangles so that you know when it's exactly a square, and once it's exactly a square, that's the time that you would turn your heel. So I'd already got past the heel when that suggestion came in, but I'll give it a try on the next one and see what happens. My other little dilemma with this is about the stripes. So as I got towards the toe, I was wondering about whether or not I would have enough yarn to make the socks match. And it doesn't look like the stripes are very long, but it's actually about 7 centimeters. So it goes from there to there, and it just repeats the same colors but in different sequences through that 7 centimeter sequence. So I was worried that if I got to the end of the toe and then I had to wind on the ball of yarn to the next sort of starter sequence, that I wouldn't end up having enough for these socks. A lot of people reassured me that it would be fine because the stripes are so you can't really tell the difference of when the stripe sequence starts. They suggested that it should be fine to just start anywhere. And what ended up happening, let's see if I can, how do I do this? So it actually is that the toe, so it goes from an aqua to a yellow, and this goes from aqua to yellow, so technically I would have to take out 7 centimeters worth of yarn in order to start at the same spot. So I decided to start the second sock in just from where the yarn had left off, but then I started pondering and I ponder a lot when I knit my socks. So what has happened now, and I've only done a few rows, so this is going to be hard to show. So I'm now knitting the grey and the purple, which start here. So I'm wondering if this off sequence of the sock is now too close, so it's going to look like I've stuffed up matching them. So I'm wondering whether or not I should unravel and just sort of start it up maybe around here or something, and then they will definitely be completely out of sync, whereas at the moment it just feels like they might be just slightly out of sync and it'll look funny. I'm overthinking my socks, aren't I? But I don't think the recipient, my mum, is going to care. She's just going to be happy to have some socks. But I think I will end up unraveling and starting that second sock again, just so that it's a little bit further out of sync. So that's that one. I also have a new cast on, which I've been chatting about. I think I've mentioned it the last few weeks. So this is from my hand spun Corridale that I spun up recently, and it's the top of a hat. So, oops, sorry. So I'm not using a pattern for this. What I did was I knit a little swatch from the Corridale with some different needles. I started off with 3.5mm needles and then went up to 4, I think, and then 5, and I decided that the fabric that I was getting with the 5mm needles was nice and flexible enough that on 3.5 it was dense and it looked like something that would be perfect for socks, but for a beanie or a hat I thought it was a bit too much. So I cast on with some DPNs, cast on 6 stitches, and for any Australians out there, these are the bamboo needles from Spotlight. I find them really lightweight. There's very little weight to these, even though they're 5mm. They're fairly pointy. Some of them are a little bit pointier than others, but yeah, I haven't had any problems with them. They're nice and smooth, so I find stitches move along on them easily. And I've got these in a few different sizes, and I've used them for socks and sleeves, and they work a treat, and they're not very expensive. So I started off on the DPNs, or double pointed needles, with 6 stitches, and then did some increases, and then I've switched over to magic loop on a circular needle. So these are my Knit Pro Symphonies, and I'm sort of trying to figure out whether or not I have enough stitches on here at the moment. Based on the gauge that I was getting on the 5mm swatch, I'm getting about 20 stitches for 4 inches, and so I counted that I needed around 90 to 95 stitches in order to get a comfortable sized hat, or sort of a hat needs to have a bit of negative ease in order to fit nicely on the head, but I don't know yet what kind of patterning I might put on the beanie. So I'm at that decision making stage of whether or not I increase a little bit more so that I can do some cables or some kind of interesting patterning. Doing patterning on a dark yarn can be a little bit difficult, so yeah, I'm sure I'll come up with something. when I sit down with this evening, and I might actually also get some of my other beanies and just measure across the crown of the beanies to see how close this is and whether it seems like a sensible point to stop the increases. There's also, because I've started from the center, there's a hole there, but I've left a tail here, and what I'll do is I'll wind the tail through the stitches there, and I'll pull it tight so that there's no hole. But then maybe I could have a pom-pom on it as well. I don't have any beanies with pom-poms on them. More decisions. So I will soon have a hand-spun beanie, which I'm very much looking forward to. I've also started a new spin, but it's hasn't got very far yet. So some months ago I picked up some alpaca fibre from Adagio Mills when I went to their open day, and I have just sort of started it, barely, maybe used up 1 or 2 grams of it, so I'll show that next time. I've done 1 square on my sock yarn blanket, so I'll wait until I've got a few more to show that one off. And I feel like casting on lots of other projects at the moment, but I need to have a look at some of the things that I've got in my stash and decide what I actually need. It feels like the days are getting a bit longer and the weather is getting a little bit more spring-like almost. So I want to knit lots of warm woolly things, but maybe that's not ideal. Although then I should probably start on some more Christmas knits to send to the Northern Hemisphere. So things to ponder. But I think that's it for all the knitting and spinning and all that kind of stuff. So just for a little bit of chatter, if you're not interested, then thank you for watching. But not much has been happening in the village this week, or outside of the village. I don't know if I've actually been anywhere this week. I have a feeling I haven't been any further than about half a kilometre from home this week. But that's okay with me. It doesn't bother me one bit. I do need to go for a supermarket drive in the next few days because the fridge is looking a little bit bare. But as I've been settling into my little country life, I've just been getting into a routine of trying to stock up on food and not having to go for those long drives too often. So apart from that sort of non-exciting stuff, I have been chatting to the local animals. I don't know, there's just something fun about having a bit of a chat. There's one particular sheep on a nearby paddock that I've been passing most days when I've been going to the post office, and we've just been having chats. So I took a little bit of video. I think that the owners are very hands-on with these sheep, and they spend a lot of time sort of looking after them and chatting to them. So it just, when I walk past, it seems to have decided that I'm a good person to chat to as well. On another little paddock, there is such a sweet little cutie. It's a little calf who has a beautiful coat on, and my goodness, is it loud. It's such a tiny thing, but it has a voice, and we've been having some chats as I've been walking past, and then as I keep walking, it sort of trots along. Do cows trot? Or it runs along beside the fence, mooing away at me, and it's super cute. And yeah, so I took a little bit of video, so I'll pop that in at the end as well. So I've also been seeing several horses actually. The chicken, the goat, dogs, lots and lots of dogs, some birds, and yeah, just animals. There seem to be animals all over the place. I'm still itching for a kitty, but that's gonna have to wait. But yep, so I'll finish up here. I'm just rambling along. I think it's lunchtime, so I'll make myself some lunch, edit this video, and get it out to you. I hope you're well. I hope you're knitting and spinning and crocheting and playing with all sorts of fibre fun. And I'll see you soon. Right up, little cow.